Warning, this video contains my own voice and only my own voice. There is nothing going on in the background. There's no music, there's no TV, there's no screens. And the only other thing that is anywhere near me is a 30-pound French bulldog who cannot talk. I am here to talk about the legal demand for papers and the questions surrounding it in the case involving the gorgeous movie star and her former co-star. The papers in question appear to detail a campaign, a smear campaign, against the gorgeous movie star, and they were included in gorgeous movie star's complaint. The complaint was dropped at the same time as a big news article, and both included these papers as evidence of bad acts on the part of her former co-star. What was confusing was how gorgeous movie star had gotten the papers. No one could figure it out because the papers, it was clear, were papers that would be in the custody and of control of the co-star's former consultant. Let's call her image maker. So what you could tell at the beginning was that image maker had these papers and that somehow those papers had made their way from image maker to gorgeous movie star. But we didn't know how. When you looked in gorgeous movie star's complaint, it alleged that she had gotten those papers through a legal demand for papers. It used the legal word one would use for a legal demand for papers. And that had lawyers confused because legal demands for papers are usually only allowed when inside of an existing case. And because gorgeous movie star had used these papers in her initial complaint opening the case to begin with, it was confusing as to how a legal demand for papers had already been sent and been fulfilled. What made it more interesting is that through another case, we discovered that in image maker's contract with the former co-star, it specifically said that there would be confidential information that arose out of their work together, and that confidential information would not be shared beyond the parties to that agreement. And it appeared that the papers that showed up in gorgeous movie star's complaint might fall into the category of confidential information. So again, how did image maker get those papers to gorgeous movie star without violating that agreement? And how could it have been done through a legal demand for papers when gorgeous movie star already had them before her case was filed? So lots of people, lawyers and otherwise, went down all kinds of rabbit holes trying to figure out what the options could be. Because gorgeous movie star's lawyers, as they were prosecuting her case, continued to use this special legal word for a legal demand for papers. It was clear that they were using that word on purpose. It was one of those, it was not something else. And so there were all kinds of options that were looked at. Could it have been in another case, but no one could find another case? Could it have been in a state where a pre-suit discovery process is allowed, like Texas or California? But again, nobody could find any evidence that any such process had ever taken place using the names of the people who were involved in the case. Some people thought maybe some sort of arbitration, but nobody could figure out where this legal demand for papers came from. Because as all lawyers know, lawyers have the power to use legal demands for papers, but not just out of the blue. The rules of civil procedure of all jurisdictions give lawyers the right to send legal demands for papers as part of representing a client in an active piece of litigation that is inside of a court. And so the question became, what could have been happening that would allow this legal demand to have been sent if that's what was actually done? So bits and pieces were dripping out. They were dripping out mostly to gossip type publications, including the Daily Mail UK, which of course knows nothing about US legal processes. We don't know where they were coming from, but it was dripping out little pieces about this legal demand for papers, like the general time frame of it, who signed it, and what law firm they were from. So we were starting to get little bits and pieces, but it still didn't answer the big question, which is, was it inside of an active case? And it's important for me to say that as of today, whatever this is, May 8th, 9th, I don't know, the public, have not seen the legal demand for papers. The lawyers may have seen it, but we have never actually seen it. So everything that we know about it has come from media reports and pleadings in the case between the gorgeous movie star and the former co-star. So that is what we have to rely on here. But over time, these little details started to drip out. And as they were dripping out, we had a couple of things in mind, right? The background things, which is we knew from the complaint, the gorgeous movie star's complaint, that these papers were included in the original complaint and in this big news article in late December. So she absolutely had them in late December. We also learned from the co-star's pleadings in that case that as of August, someone in the co-star's camp was told, "We've seen the papers." So we're trying to figure out what happened between August, when they allege they've seen the papers, gorgeous movie stars people say we've seen the papers, and December, where they had the papers. So then in the space of 1 week, everything exploded. First was a creator discovered a case that fit the bill for being the type of case where a demand for legal papers could have been issued that would meet all of the things we had been looking for. She uncovered that there was a September 27th case that was filed in New York State Court, that case was filed by a company with a name that nobody would recognize because it didn't relate to gorgeous movie star or anyone near her in a way that you could tell unless you were looking for it. But that on research, that company was very much related to gorgeous movie star and the people around her. That case had been filed by that company on September 27th. That the case was against John and Jane Doe's only. No actual people, no actual companies, no actual names. Claiming breach of contract, although it didn't attach a contract. And it doesn't make sense that you would sue somebody for breach of contract without knowing their name. You can file cases against Doe's. It is done sometimes when you're not sure exactly who the people are. But if you had a contract with them, you would know who they are. So we knew that case had been filed. That case docket consisted of only two things: the complaint that was filed on September 27th, and the closure of that case in December. Now, we know that things like legal demands for papers do not get filed in court in most circumstances. You do not have to file them in court in order for them to be issued. Because when you're inside of an actual case, lawyers have the power to send those legal demands for papers. So it wasn't shocking that the legal demand for papers that we were looking for wasn't filed on the docket there. But around the same time, another news organization was shown the legal demand for papers. And this news organization talked about what they had seen inside a legal demand for papers that matched up with, again, the things we had been looking for. So according to the news organization who had seen the legal demand for papers, they did not print it, they did not let us see it, they said that they had viewed it. The information they provided was that it was dated October 1st, which is 4 days after this New York State Court case had been filed. that it was a legal demand for papers to the image maker, the one who had the papers, that it requested all records, data, communications, blah, 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 in control of the image maker, which is normal. It also requested records regarding Gorgeous Movie Star's spouse, who had nothing to do with the claims that she ultimately made. So that was strange. And then there were some other things about it that seemed a little bit odd. The way the legal demand asked for records was all of the documents, data, communications, whatever, collected from the cellular telephone that you have. It didn't name the owner of the phone. It didn't put the phone number. It didn't put any of the details that would normally be in a legal demand for papers. I'm sure ImageMaker has many cellular telephones within her control. It didn't say which one. It just said, you know, that one, which made it clear that ImageMaker knew exactly what they were looking for because she had already told them about it. It also asked for records back to December 1st of 2022, according to the news organization, which is right around the time that the Gorgeous Movie Star first signed on to be in the movie that is the subject of her case against her co-star. So it appeared that we had put the puzzle pieces together, that this was the legal demand for papers that had been sent to get these papers, and that it had been sent under the guise of a New York State court case that had been filed by a company no one could identify, but that could be linked back to Gorgeous Movie Star, and it had no activity in it whatsoever since it was filed except to close it. We then had the rest of the gaps filled in for us by attorneys representing various people involved in this. Not the image maker. She's not talking, and her lawyers aren't talking because she's in really big fucking trouble. But we found out from the lawyers for the former co-star that even though the image maker had confidentiality obligations with regard to information about their work together, he was never notified that a legal demand for papers had been sent, and he was never notified that she was responding to a legal demand for papers, sending this information over to Gorgeous Movie Star. We also know by looking at the docket of the New York State court case that the image maker never filed anything with the court, as one would normally do, saying, I've received a legal demand for papers. I'm concerned that some of them are covered by a confidentiality provision in a contract. I need the court to help me figure out what to do in responding to this legal demand. She never did that. So as far as we can tell, the image maker received the legal demand for papers out of the case against no one. She did no notifications to anyone. She turned over everything that she had to the Gorgeous Movie Star. The Gorgeous Movie Star put them in her complaint, said the papers had been received through a legal demand for papers, filed a complaint, sent it to a big news organization, and when that got published, that's when the co-star and everybody involved found out. Oh, and the last piece of information came in that the New York State court case that the legal demand for papers had come out of was withdrawn the day before the Gorgeous Movie Star's complaint was filed and the big news article was published. The day before. So the questions that we were talking about, which are totally appropriate questions for anyone to talk about who cares about legal process and who cares about how the law works, is, was this an okay way to get these papers? Was this above board? And here's what I can tell you and what I have been saying to people. This New York State court case that was filed by this company that nobody could identify, but that was ultimately linked back to the Gorgeous Movie Star. It appears to have been filed for no actual legal purpose. The case was filed against John Does, but made no effort to find out who the John Does were, did no attempted service of anybody. claimed to be a claim for breach of contract, but did not attach a contract, which is standard practice. And also, you would know who you contracted with. So that case was filed, opened, and then sat completely dead until it was withdrawn. So there's a question about whether that is a sham case, whether it was filed only for the purposes of harassment or some other inappropriate purpose, and it didn't have any legal or factual basis. That is one of the questions. They had no intent to pursue that case, clearly, because between September 27th when it was filed and December 19th when it was withdrawn, as far as we can tell, there was absolutely no attempt by anyone in that case to find the defendants, to try to serve somebody. The only thing that happened in that case that we can see so far is the serving of the legal demand for papers on the image maker. That's literally the whole reason the case was filed. So there is a live question as to whether that is an appropriate reason to bring a case. Was that a sham case? Was that an abusive process? In addition to that, most rules of court, including the rules of court of this New York State court, require that inside a case, when a lawyer is sending a legal demand for papers, that they notify all of the other parties in the case that they're going to do it. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of which is, in litigation, everybody gets notice of what everybody else is doing because you can't hide things from each other. But also, you let everyone know when you're serving a legal demand for papers in case there are things that someone wants to challenge. But because the defendants in this case were unknowns, no one got notice of anything. So that's a question. Does that make the legal demand for papers invalid? In addition to that, the image maker, when she received the legal demand for papers, did absolutely nothing, as far as we know so far, and I feel like she would have told us by now if she did absolutely nothing to notify anyone, anywhere, that there might be confidentiality obligations under her own contract with her own client that limited her ability to turn these papers over. She did nothing. So that creates a huge question for her. I don't care how many people question me on it. This is very unusual. I have never seen this I'm coming up on 25 years of legal practice and litigation. I've never seen it before. And neither have any of the lawyers I know. We've all talked about it. No one has ever seen this before. So for people to say this is common and this is usual, I'm sorry, I do not buy it. Now, there can be a question as to whether there is more discretion under the New York bar system than there is other systems about how you use the state court system to serve legal demands for papers. That I do not know. But the allegation that like this amongst lawyers is common is horseshit. It's just not. The other question that has been asked a lot is, how does this affect the main case, the case of the gorgeous movie star against her former co-star? And that is, we don't know yet. This is not in front of the judge in that case. Now, he has been given little pieces of notice of it through pleadings and answers and motions that have been filed since then, but we are not at a point in the case, in the main case, in federal court, where the judge can really consider this for any issue. He may be later. There may be some motion raised, I don't know, a motion for summary judgment or a motion for sanctions or something like that. But this judge right now, this is not his problem. Someone has to make it his problem in order for him to rule on it. But that's the story of the legal demand for papers. And I don't understand why people are so concerned about it that they want videos muted if it's not that big of a deal. Because the statements being put out by gorgeous movie stars' lawyers are, this is no big deal. It's totally above board. It happens all the time. Then why mute people? Doesn't make much sense to me. So let's see what happens with this video, shall we? You guys are probably going to be better at tracking it than I am. Sorry, my dog is snoring. But this is an experiment. Let's see how she goes.